The first meal we are making today is breakfast. For breakfast, we are going to be making French toast casserole. If you don't want to make this in the morning, you can actually make this completely, all dished up the night before and stick it in the fridge and then just pull it out in the morning and bake it. So just remember that. Okay. To make this, you will need 8 to 12 slices of bread and your 9 by 13 greased glass baking dish and several eggs. Okay, so you may be thinking, why on earth would I make a loaf of homemade bread just to cut it up and, not even get to enjoy it as whole? You can go out and buy store-bought bread. Remember that, you can. The reason I do this is, number one, it is a little cheaper, but yes, I can get the absolute cheapest bread, store-bought, and make this, and it'd be much easier. And sometimes I do, I'm not gonna lie, sometimes I do. But when I can, this is healthier and it is a little cheaper than the cheapest bread. Okay, so we're just going to slice it up. Okay, so again, we're gonna need 8 to 12 slices of bread. Okay, now, what you do with your bread is you take it, and then I like to cut it into thirds, long ways, rotate it, and then cut it into thirds again, thereby creating cubes. Okay, and then just dump them in your pan. Okay, and you're gonna do that with, like I said, 8 to 12 slices of bread. It depends on just how thick your cut is of each slice, or how thick of the bread slices that you buy at the store. But anyway, you want it thick in here, okay? Now, we're also going to need 8 eggs. Okay. And as far as eggs go, we have our own chickens, so that's another cost savings. All right, so I will come back to you and show you what this looks like when it's put together. Okay, so we have our bread all cubed up and put in the dish. And get this out of the way. In here I have scrambled 8 eggs. Now we're going to add in half a cup of sugar, 3 cups of milk, and this milk is raw, we get from a local lady. I encourage you to seek out your local dairy. Hopefully you have a place you could get some raw milk from. Raw dairy, raw milk is so healthy. I will put a link in the description box below. That takes you to a website that just covers all the things about raw dairy. For us, where we live, it's actually cheaper per gallon than in the stores. The next thing we need is a teaspoon of vanilla extract, half a teaspoon of salt. You can use any salt you want. And then for the spices, you can use any spice you want. I'm using a 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon and a 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg. Just mix it all together. Now we're just going to pour this over the bread. Don't want to waste anything. Now what we're going to do, we're going to let this sit for a few minutes, 5 to 10, for the bread to soak up this liquid. And I'm just poking down the tops of the ones that are exposed, which is pretty good if you don't, because then they get a little bit more crispy. But I like to make sure they at least have some of the liquid on them. And also make sure it's pretty level While we are waiting on the casserole to sit for a little bit, I want to go over a couple things. I'm often asked about these two, so let's go over this first. Okay, this is an oil sprayer, okay? This particular one just has olive oil in it, straight olive oil, nothing else. Those aerosol cans of, cooking spray, if you look at the ingredients, a lot of them have butane, and then another item, which it's been a very long time since I've had to look at them, but butane and then another item. And that ingredient and the other one, even on the can it says highly flammable, and they expect you to spray it on a hot surface around your stove that you're cooking with. Those are toxic. So we switched to this quite a while ago. I found out about it from my friend. She has had one for probably a decade, and for years, I would keep track of it and ask her how it worked and everything, and if she still liked it, and it's still going. She loves it. So we got one, and we love it. So you just spray it as you would, but it's a trigger pull, okay? It's not an aerosol, and the only thing I don't like about it is it's more of a mess. So like if you're spraying a skillet on a stove, the backsplash is going to get little oil droplets. But just get in the habit of cleaning your stove and it's fine. Anyhow, but that is the only downfall that there is to it. But it actually does work. It has never clogged up, and neither has my friend's. Yeah, it is just plain olive oil. So again, you can control the ingredients. And if you buy in bulk like we do, it's actually cheaper to do it this way than to buy those little cans that you later throw away. This is reusable, refillable. It's easy peasy. The other thing that I get asked about, this is an old amber colored glass bottle that used to be an extra virgin olive oil bottle, okay? But I recycled it, and in here is coconut oil. It's just pure, straight coconut oil. Okay. The thing I'm often asked about this is how I keep it a liquid, because it's not fractionated coconut oil, it is solid coconut oil, and it stays a liquid. And the reason it's so greasy is the same reason it stays liquid, because this stays on the stovetop, okay? It stays on the flat surface of the stovetop. Now, some mornings when I wake up, especially in the winter, it's a solid, but then when I turn our water kettle on to make us coffee, usually by then it starts melting again, and so there you go. So what I have here, what I use this for is just a liquid oil. So in my cabinet, I have a liquid olive oil. That's the same kind of bottle as this, and then I have this liquid coconut oil. And then in an upper cabinet, I have a gallon of solid coconut oil. And we use that for baking, like pie crust, and whatever else. But then I also will melt it down and then fill it in here when this gets empty. Okay, so those are two other ways that you can cut down on your grocery bill instead of buying those aerosol cans, and control the ingredients for what you're feeding your family. Okay, this is ready to go into the oven, so we are going to bake this on 350 for about 1 hour, and it's not going to be covered. This recipe, this French toast casserole, I got this recipe from Homesteading Family, and I think that it is very important that whenever you learn something from someone, that you give credit where credit is due. So this recipe came from Homesteading Family. Now for my husband's breakfast that we're going to make him for the next couple days at work will be scrambled eggs mixed with ground sausage, cheese, and hot sauce.
Breakfast for the next 2 days.
So that 1 pound of sausage has been divided into 3 breakfast items. Remember last night for supper we made that roasted chicken in the Dutch oven, and then I took all of the chicken bones, the chicken carcass. I took off as much meat by hand as possible, which was pretty much all of it, and then I took the bones and put them in the crock pot to cook on low all night long while we were sleeping. For extra broth, Now we are going to sort through this and remove the bones and the skin and put the broth in the fridge for use in a couple other meals this week. So by doing this, again, we are stretching that one chicken, okay? We are getting more meals from it, more nutrition because this was an organic chicken. You're getting vitamins and minerals, collagen, all kinds of good stuff for your health, your gut, your bones, your joints, your hair, your nails, everything. So you don't want to just toss those bones and skin. You know, you don't want to waste that. So this is another way to save money so you don't have to buy broth. And look, the crock pot does the work for you. While you are sleeping, it's making the broth. So there's really no reason not to. So on this one chicken, we are getting 4 meals that we are getting that chicken from. And then the broth, some of that broth that's in this crock pot and some that I strained off last night from the actual roast, those broths will be combined. And if there's any left, which I figure there will be, then because there's not enough to can, I'll just stick it in the freezer for another meal in the future. I can see a pretty layer of oil on top, which is the fat, so that'll solidify in the fridge. All right, so we're going to go ahead and strain this off and filter it some, and then we're going to put the broth in the fridge. First, I'm just going to get all the skin and bones out. That way when I go to pour it, the bones aren't falling in and splashing and making a fatty mess everywhere. And here in a minute, I will tell you what you can use this for. A piping hot half-gallon of beautiful, lovely chicken broth. Oh, it smells so good. For this week's of meals, you saw that we made a couple loaves of regular bread, and then we made a loaf of sourdough bread. Now, I want to go ahead and say in here that any recipe that you see where I use these breads, you don't have to use sourdough or regular. You can use regular bread for all of it, or sourdough for all of it, or whatever you want. The purpose of this is I just wanted to show you a couple different ways to use both the breads. What we normally do, I will make one batch of regular bread, usually about once a month, sometimes twice a month, it depends what's going on, but usually once a month. And that one batch of regular bread gives us 2 of those loaves. Then also, usually about once a month, I will make one round artisan loaf of sourdough. Okay, but I never do the 2 together at the same time like I did yesterday. Okay, again, I just wanted to do them both so you could see different uses. Okay, each of my regular bread weighs 20 ounces. My sourdough bread, one of that loaf weighs 27 ounces. So in case you're curious about how much bread you're actually getting. On my regular bread, each one, again, weighs 20 ounces, but I can slice it into 15 slices. So one of these loaves of regular bread, about part of it, 3/4 of it, if not a full loaf, I'm going to store in the freezer, and we will have it available when we need it, maybe for next week or the week after. So that's another way you can just like batch cook and then freeze some for another use. Okay, the timer went off for our breakfast, so our French toast casserole is done. So let's go ahead and pull it out of the oven. Okay, this has cooled down for about 5 minutes or so. So now we can go ahead and eat it. Just gonna take a knife and loosen it up from the edges. And you can cut this into however big of portions you need. So there you go, French toast casserole. So a portion this size, this will serve 6 people. If you're going to offer other things with it, like yogurt or fruit, then you could, cut this in half and you could even get 12 servings out of it. So to go with the French toast casserole, my daughter and I, my husband, he's already at work, and I showed you the breakfast that we made for him. And so for my daughter and I's breakfast, we're having the French toast casserole with a little mandarin orange. So we're going to go right into what we're making for supper. To make the chicken pot pie, we are going to take some of this chicken that we roasted last night and shred it up for the chicken in the pot pie, and the onions and the carrots and the potatoes. This is going to be some of our vegetable filling for the pot pie. Now, if you remember, in the Dutch oven, there was a lot of broth in with these vegetables. That broth I had strained off and put in this container right here and stuck it and placed it in the fridge. You can see it is nice and thick. Just so you will remember, this chicken broth is what we cooked down out of the chicken carcass in the crock pot overnight. For the filling, the cream filling sauce for the pot pie, we will be making that from scratch too. Now our pie crust, we're also going to be making from scratch. So let's go ahead and cut up our chicken. This chicken right here, this, in addition with the vegetables, will be enough for this 9x13 glass baking dish. We have our chicken here in this bowl, and I've taken some of these vegetables and I've just kind of chopped them up like this. It doesn't have to look pretty, just smaller pieces. Okay, so now I'm looking at this and I'm looking at the 9x13 pan, and I think I'm going to go ahead and use the rest of these vegetables because I want this pot pie to be a full pan, and this amount will just make it just right. Okay, so now that we have our chicken and our vegetables done, now we are going to make the cream filling for this. To make our cream filling, I just make it from scratch. I put in some butter. This is probably about 2 tablespoons maybe. You just want to heat up some butter, and then you're going to thicken it with flour. And then you'll want to add milk or broth or both. I usually do a combination of both. This is that really thick broth that you saw that cooked from the chicken yesterday. This has a whole lot of flavor. So I'm just going to actually skim off the top of it, the part that's more yellow. And I will put that in here when it's ready for it. The broth that we poured off this morning, this is more liquidy, so I'm going to use this for most of the liquid in here, in addition with some milk. So let me go ahead and get my liquid ready. Okay, so for my liquid, I just put in some milk, and over here I'm just going to scoop out some of this broth. By doing it this way, it's less of a mess whenever it's time to actually pour it in. You're not trying to pour it out of this bigger jar and possibly dump it. So I just like getting, I'm not sure, I always just eyeball everything. This is about 2.5 cups of liquid. As far as the butter goes, you can use store-bought stick butter, or you can just make your own. So we make our own butter as well. Currently, I am out of regular homemade butter. The only butter I have homemade right now is cultured butter, and I'm not really wanting that flavor for this, so I just opened a stick of some store-bought butter. But making your own butter saves a lot of money as well. And once again, you can control the ingredients. So if you're interested in how to make butter, I will link to a video and an article in the description box below. So I have just turned the heat on about medium, and we're going to wait for this butter to melt. So the butter is melting. It's all melted and starting to sizzle. So we're going to go ahead and add in some flour. We're just going to use as much flour as necessary until all of the butter is absorbed. You can see it's pretty well. I'm going to sprinkle in some more. That looks good to me. So I used about half a cup of flour. Now we're going to pour our liquid in, and you want to stir while you're pouring. Now what you do, you just stir often. I pretty much do a continuous stir, but you don't have to as long as you keep an eye on it and keep up with it. But as the milk heats up, the flour will start to thicken, and it will first thicken at the bottom. So you want to make sure that you are keeping it stirred up so it doesn't burn to the bottom and that everything is being evenly distributed. And also, I don't know if you noticed or not, but I did not use all of my liquid all at once. Just add what you need at first, like I did, and then it'll thicken up. And then once it gets to be too thick for you, it depends on what you're using. You can use this, what we're doing here, for anything, for just a cream soup that you eat with toast and a spoon, or pot pie filling, or I don't know, anything really, anything that you want, you can use this for. So the consistency that you want will vary depending on what you're using it for. So for this, I'm going to let it thicken up, and if I feel it needs more liquid, I will add more. And this part takes a little bit because it takes some time for that heat to come up and heat all the milk up enough to start thickening again. I'm going to go ahead and add in this yellow top layer of fat before I forget about it. So delicious. Okay, I can feel it starting to thicken at the bottom. For those nights when you don't have time to make your cream soup from scratch like I am doing right now, which technically I don't have the time, but I'm doing it anyway for this video. Something that I recently just started doing or making is this pretty instant cream soup mix. This is good. It is very good. But in my opinion, it has nothing on making it like this. This is just so good. I could just eat this with a spoon. It is delicious. This is very quick as well. I'm going to go ahead and add the rest of this liquid. You may have noticed that I didn't really measure anything out. I'm that kind of cook. I just eyeball everything, and I just cook by taste and feel and smell. So that's how I cook. But I do have a video that I did a few years ago about making cream of soups. I think in that video I showed maybe 3 different ways on how you can make this, whether with flour or cornstarch, milk or broth. I don't remember. And then I showed other ways on how to flavor it, whether beef or chicken, cheese or mushroom or onion or celery. So I'll go ahead and I'll link that video in the description box too. But just remember, it's an old video and I try to be very detailed, so sorry. This is done to the consistency that I want for what I'm making for the pot pie. So here we go. Here's our chicken and our vegetables and our sauce. So I didn't pour all of the sauce in because I want to see how much this actually needs. And again, I just eyeball everything. Okay, that's actually pretty good. I really don't need to add any more, but I'm going to. So I don't really have too much left. I'm going to go ahead and add in some celery flakes. Give it a little taste. That's good. Okay, this is ready to go for the filling, but I'm going to move it to the side so I can have this space to make the pie crust. The oven is preheating on 350. Okay, so I'm going to make a 2-crust pie recipe. So in here I have 2 cups of regular all-purpose flour, and I have 1 teaspoon of salt. So I'm going to go ahead and mix that up. Now we're going to put in 2/3 cup of coconut oil. You can use lard if you want. I don't recommend shortening because it is not good for you, but you can use shortening. We have used lard in the past, but we no longer can as our youngest is allergic to pork, unfortunately. Okay. The trick to making pie crust is that you do not overwork the dough. If you overwork it too much, you're going to develop the gluten in it, and it's not going to be light and flaky. And I don't know about you, but we love a flaky pie crust. That is some really hard coconut oil. We were out of it up here. Well, almost out of it. I think I had a couple tablespoons left in my gallon jug. So I had my youngest go downstairs in our extra room and bring up another gallon of coconut oil. And it stays pretty cold down there. Okay, so we have our 2/3 cup of coconut oil. Now I'm just going to take this pastry blender. This is really super old. You can see I'm missing 2 prongs, 2 pieces, but I can't find any more exactly like this, and this is really good. We're going to take the pastry blender and just cut the coconut oil into the flour into little bitty pieces. Make it look like little clumps of peas, small little peas. So we got this mixed up. Now you're going to add some very cold water. It's going to need more water than this. You want to start out small and then use a spoon and mix it in. The reason you want your water to be cold is so it keeps your coconut oil cold, because you do not want your coconut oil to be warm or hot, because then it'll just be a liquid oil and it'll melt into everything and you won't get those little pockets of flaky crust. Okay, so you can see what this looks like. It is just coming together. So now we're going to turn it out. Okay, first, we need to flour our countertop and your hands. And get your pie crust. Kind of get it together in a ball like this. This is for 2 pies. Now, what I always do when I make pot pie, pretty much 95% of the time, I make the round pie pans. Okay, you know, like really pretty, and I make them round, but making 2 of those is more time consuming than just making 1 of these. So we're going to have a rustic pot pie tonight with this. Now, because this is a for 2 crust, we got to cut it down the middle in half. So I'm just going to try to make it even here. It's pretty even. Put 1 to the side. Okay, do you see all those little coconut, oil pockets? Okay. So what's going to happen, those little coconut oil pockets, whenever they melt, that is where you will get the little flaky bits of the pie crust that we all love. My grandma, when she used to make pie crust, you know, before she died, she would always put some vinegar in her pie crust, and she always said it made it more flaky, and she had delicious pie crust, but I personally have never found that necessary. I've tried it both ways, and we can't tell a difference. Whenever you are rolling out pie crust, you want to frequently be flipping it over, back and forth, and rotating it so it doesn't stick to your countertop. Now, if you have a special kind of countertop, marble might be okay. I don't know. We have wood. Here in our kitchen, we have to constantly rotate it or flip it over to keep it from sticking. You always want to make sure that it's floured underneath. You saw that the coconut oil I had was very cold. It was very, very hard. Because of that, the coconut oil pieces, they don't really blend in with the flour here as easy as when the coconut oil is up here. It's still a solid up here in the kitchen, but it's not quite as hard. So I get much smaller pieces of the coconut oil in here, and that's exactly what you want. These are pretty big. It'll do. It's not ideal, okay? But just so you know, when it does this, if you do have big chunks of coconut oil in here and you're trying to do this, sometimes those, as you're rolling them out, they will like tear your dough or stick to the counter more easily. So you just got to roll with it. Let's go ahead, transfer this to here. And then you lick the spoon. Now let's roll out the second one. This one will go on the top. Like I said, this is a rustic pot pie. Okay, so it may not look the best. I'm a little rushed here, but it will still taste delicious. And I'm sure we will all be fighting over these outside edges as they are thicker here. And that's going to be the really tasty crust here. All right, so now we're going to get this in the oven and let it bake until it's nice and golden and I see little bubbles coming from the cream sauce up here through these holes that we poked. Okay, so our chicken pot pie is done and I heated 2 sweet potatoes back up. These are the sweet potatoes that we prepared, that we baked in the oven yesterday, if you recall. So it did not take long for those to heat back up. Okay, so here is supper for tonight. We have our baked sweet potato that is nice and tender with some butter already melted on there. And then our chicken pot pie that's nice and steamy. I also like to put some cinnamon on the sweet potato.